This is good. Okay, I'm going to mute everyone, if that's okay. Okay. Let me go to. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. And I shared two conversations that I had with two people that I encountered. And we know nothing. I was going to say two random encounters, but nothing is random. Everything is divine by divine providence. And they were both interesting. One more interesting than the other, but both interesting. And I shared them with Rosie. And she said, you should share that on Zoom. So I said, I will share that on Zoom. So that's what I'd like to share with you tonight. These two conversations that I had, which both lead me to the same lesson, because everything that God puts in our life is, as the Baal Shem Tov taught us, for us to learn from. We never let an experience go to waste, because it's there for a purpose, for us to learn something from it or to do something with it. This week's Torah portion, it's a double portion. I'm warning you, Mike, it's going to be a long Torah reading. So it's Chukas and Balak. And the second portion, which we started studying today, Wednesday, Balak is a king who hates the Jews, your classic anti-Semite. He even joins together with his enemies in order to go against the Jews. And he hires a man by the name of Bilam to curse the Jews. Bilam is a prophet, a Gentile prophet, which is really unusual. But God created, Rashi tells us, God created a Gentile prophet because he said that the Gentiles are going to complain and say, well, you gave the Jews prophets. Had you given us prophets? So God said, I'll give you a prophet. We'll see what he produces. And he ended up being a person who was in it all for money. Not an unusual story if we observe the world around us. I don't think it was ever an unusual story. He was all in it for himself. And he just wanted to cash out on any opportunity to use his prophetic abilities to make more money. And he also was an anti-Semite. But what we learn from the prophecies that come through Bilam are things that we don't learn from anyone else. It's actually quite fascinating. We actually learn some fascinating things from Bilam. In fact, if you want to know where Mashiach is mentioned in the Torah, which is fascinating, Mashiach is such a central belief that Maimonides says is one of the 13 fundamental beliefs of Judaism, and yet you don't find it explicitly mentioned in the Torah. It's alluded to in 3 times. One of them is, and I believe the first time that it's alluded to in the Torah, is in the prophecy of Bilam. So we learn something from this wicked, horrible person that wanted the Jews destroyed. On the Friday, I shared that Dasan and Aviram, the 2 major troublemakers in the Torah, who gave Moshe a hard time every step of the way, even they took a beating to protect their fellow Jews. There was something that we can learn from that. There's a verse that King David writes in Psalm 119, which is the Rebbe's psalm for this year, because the Rebbe's age, of course, the Rebbe's not living, but the Rebbe's age, which we continue even after, because a person doesn't end. Only their body ends, is 118. And on the 118th year, we read Psalm 119, which is the longest Psalm in Tehillim. It's 176 verses. And there's a verse there where King David writes, Mikol malamdai hiskalti. I have become wise from all who have taught me, which is a very interesting point. And that is that King David had the ability and the humility and the wisdom to learn from every single person. He had a teacher by the name of Achitophel, who later, what's the right word? He defected. Achitophel was possibly the most brilliant Torah scholar of his day. King David learned from him. King David was also one of the most brilliant Torah scholars of his day. But Achitophel was one of the most, I think he may have been I don't remember exactly if he was the head of the Sanhedrin, but he defected when King David's son Avshalom started a rebellion against his father, King David. Achitophel joined the rebellion. The end was that the rebellion was quashed, and Achitophel committed suicide because he knew he was in big trouble, because he sided with the rebellion, and now King David was back in power. Whether King David would have done something to him or not, who knows? But King David surely could have done something to him. So, however, he learned from Achitophel, and he called him my teacher. There's a teaching in Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers. It says, "Harbe lamaditi mirabosai." I have learned much from my teachers. Umechaverei yoser mirabosai. And from my friends, I learned from my friends more than I learned from my teachers. Umitalmidai, and from my students, yoser mikulam, I learned more than from all of them. It requires a humility, an unspoken, a subtle humility, but very, very profound humility, to be able to stand next to someone who you can easily reject, and to learn from them. That's the main point I want to bring out over here. And the main point I want to bring out is, it is our obligation to, because when we don't, we are creating a destruction in our community and in our society when we are unwilling to hear someone else. So some of you know that we have a very special gentleman that comes to shul. He wears a special baseball hat that advertises which president he loves. And if you missed it on his baseball hat, you'll see it on his car with the flag sort of flying from his car. And I really, first of all, I really see him, if nothing else, than an opportunity to actually try to actually be open-minded, because he definitely gives off the appearance of being a radical person. But when you speak to him, he's actually very, very intelligent. He's a very smart guy. I wouldn't say that I would necessarily agree with everything he says, and I let him know that. And we have good conversations about it. And I hear him out, and he hears me out. We challenge each other quite well, I think. And we both enjoy that, and it's fantastic. And in fact, a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity we got into a conversation about, the rioting and the demonstrations that are going on, just me and two other people. And it was my impression that they looked at this person as a complete radical, especially because I don't think their political leanings are aligned. The two parties, the party of two that I was talking to, and this gentleman. But in the conversation, and the gentleman standing there and me giving him some space to express himself, and then him leaving, I was able to demonstrate, you see, here is a guy who gives off a certain impression in our minds. It's our judgments, but when you let him speak, it's a different story. You got to hear him out. And even if you disagree with him, he's not a dunce who's just speaking. He's very intelligent. He's thoughtful. He has experiences in life. He shares fascinating experiences that he's had as a teacher in inner cities. This is not yet any of my two conversations. It's all just me being very passionate about the idea that we really need to be open-minded. I'm not saying open-minded in the sense that we need to agree, but open-minded to hear. It makes us wiser. Even if we don't agree, it makes us wiser because we understand where the other person's coming from and why they have that perspective. It makes us wiser to be able to explain to them where they're wrong if we truly believe that they are. So the two experiences that I had, the conversations I had one was I walked into a St. Mary's rehab. Some of you, the locals, will know. They opened up a new rehab across from the hospital to pick up our good friend who was being released, thank God. And when I was walking in, there was a woman, I'm going to say an older woman, whatever older means to you. She was wearing a mask. When I say older, she was older than me by at least 25 years. So she was not young. And she was wearing a mask. And so I couldn't really see her. And she said, "Hi, Rabbi." Okay, I figured she knows who I am. So I said, "Hi, what's your name?" So she told me her first name. And as she began to speak, I knew that I did not know her. But she said, "I am so blessed to see you. You are one of the blessed chosen. And even though we may speak of different gods or whatever it is," and she starts mentioning, it wasn't Casper the ghost, but it was a relative, I guess, and some other things. So I don't need to repeat, but whatever it was. But she was saying that, you are the one who was chosen, and through you, we were also whatever. We are also chosen, whatever it was. But she said she was so, she just felt like it was a big blessing to see me. Okay, because I guess she identified me as a rabbi. And that was interesting. And so we spoke for a couple of minutes. She said, "I'm overwhelmed by emotion." That's what she was telling me, that she was so, whatever it was. But you know what? What she did accomplish was this. She is of a different faith. And she did accomplish that she drew me closer to her, not further from her. That's what she accomplished, right? She chose to make our meeting a connecting point, not a divisive point. And clearly there's a lot that separates the two of us. But at the same time, she just said something that she believed to be true in her heart that would be a compliment to me. And that connected, that sort of brought us closer together, if you will. Then I had another conversation, and this was a really interesting conversation. And I'll share it with you, even though it's a little bit edgy. But I dropped off my daughter at camp. We have a short abbreviated camp now for 4 weeks. So I dropped off Menucha Rachel, some of you know, and our 7-year-old. And then when I was leaving and I was coming to the corner, we have our guard, Jim, who was standing outside. And he was speaking to a older woman who is at least 25 years older than me, wearing a mask. I had no idea who she was. And she was speaking to, and when she saw me, she said, "Good morning, Rabbi." So I said, "Good morning." I can act like a gentleman sometimes. And and she said, I was over, I asked her who she was. She says, "I was over at your home for Shabbos dinner a few years ago." She was one of the hundreds. Many people tell me they were by my home for Shabbos dinner. It's a little bit embarrassing, but I have no idea who they are because they came once and whatever. I can't remember everyone that comes. And she said, my mother, your wife used to visit my mother at Attleboro, which is a nursing home. And I came over with my mother for Shabbos dinner. And I'm still hurt by you. That's what she tells me. Wow. I don't think anyone ever told me that, to be honest with you. That was the first. So that was interesting, piqued my interest. So this is going to be fun. I said, how did I hurt your feelings? So she told me that my mother needed help with her chair and you wouldn't help her because she was a woman. Now, the reason why I feel very comfortable sharing this with you is because anyone, at least from the community that knows me, knows, as I do, that that's an outright lie, right? So I said, so she was throwing the side. So I saw that she wasn't somewhat angry as a person and judgmental. That was clear to me. That was a quick. That was a quick assessment based on what she's telling me. So I said, well, what exactly happened? So she said, my mother needed help with the chair and you wouldn't help her because she was a woman. I said, how do you know that's the reason why I wouldn't help her? So I told her, I will tell you factually that the only reason why I didn't help her is because I did not see. If I had seen, I would absolutely have helped her. Okay, don't think that helped much, but put that out there. And then she continued and said that, you people, you Orthodox Jews who support Trump, it's very, very troubling. And how can you support an evil man? Now, why did, based on what was she assuming that we people support Trump? I'm going to say was a very fair assumption, because it's very widely known that the broader population of Orthodox Jews do support Trump. So that's not for a discussion, but she said, you people. So I corrected her and said, it's not you Jews, it's we Jews. And it's not you people, it's we people. We are all Jews and we're all human beings. She was a little bit flustered by that. And then she said, this thing about whatever, and you think that because he's helping Israel, he's good, whatever. She went retired, which is really not the point of my conversation at all. And I did not get into it with her either, because it was clear to me that there's no way I would have a productive political conversation with her. But I told her, I said, what our country needs now more than anything else is for people to learn to respect the views of others who see things differently than them. That's it. Just respect people who see. And I said, I respect you for your opinion. I'm not attacking you. And I would expect you to respect me as well. So she insisted that she cannot do that. She's not the first person I met like this. She can't do that because Trump is evil, which I'm not even arguing. I'm not even arguing whether he's evil or not. And anyone who supports him is evil. And there would be no justification to support him. And therefore, she cannot respect such people. And so I just said, there are very intelligent people who see things differently than you, and you should respect them. They're not just, boneheads who have, they see the world differently than you do, and you should just respect them. You don't have to agree with them, just respect them. She said, I can't do that. So I told her, well, then you're choosing not to be a part of the solution. And then she told me, I hope you're going to think about this. And I told her, and I hope you're going to think about this too. Have a wonderful day. That was the conversation. It just reminded me. And I feel that I need to repeat this message 1,001 times. It reminded me that every single one of us, and I think that when we do this, we actually increase the numbers of people doing this. Every single one of us that hears anyone, I spoke to her. I spoke to her more strongly than I speak to people who I meet for the first time. I mean, I met her for the second time, but I didn't recall her. I generally don't speak to people as strongly as you did. Like I immediately told her when she said, you Jews and you people, I immediately told her, we Jews and we people. That was a very strong, correction, which flustered her. And I'm pretty sure I did not say it in a sweet, friendly, lovey-dovey tone. I said it, firmly. And it was probably because of what I'm telling you right now. I believe that we need to hold ourselves first and foremost always, and others accountable to be respectful of other people. We need to put out a voice in the world that we need to respect other people. I'm not saying we need to respect violent criminals. I'm not saying that we need to applaud everything everyone does. I am saying that we need to respect fellow citizens who have different viewpoints, whatever they may be. And I say this comfortably because I believe that I genuinely respect people who have very, very different opinions than me. I don't respect people who don't respect me. And I find that to be extremely, extremely offensive and violating, not on a personal level, but that is the very thing that is ripping down the fiber of our society today. So we need to be examples of saying, I can learn from you and you can learn from me. And if there's anyone who doesn't believe that to be true, I would challenge them to say, why don't you keep your mouth closed and listen to the radical person on the other side, whichever side you're on, the radical person on the other side, and let them just explain their viewpoint. And then tell me from the 5 points they make that there isn't a single one that you can agree with. There's got to be one. They're sensible people. Of course there are some. You may say that there are overriding factors, and that's why you're not going to go with that. Fine. But at least hear them out and at least agree that they're not off the wall, that they're sensible. I think this is an obligation for every single one of us. There's a reason why in the Torah we have the fundamental core mitzvah of love your fellow Jew as yourself. And that's because without this, we can't make solid headway. And this is really what it takes. And the reason why we struggle with love your fellow as yourself is for this very reason. We don't have the humility to stand before another person and hear them out and acknowledge what it is that is true about what they're saying, even when we disagree with them overall. That's fine. And we also, and we will also find that our ability to influence the other person, everything we really want, right? We yell at them, right? As if that helps one bit. Everything, when we want to influence them, we will have 10 times, if not 100 times more influence over them if we can actually acknowledge some truth on their part. How should they acknowledge truth on our part if we can't even acknowledge truth on their part? It's called respecting another person. If we can't listen to another person, we're not respecting them. Respecting another person is giving them the time of day. That is what King David tells us when he says, Mikol Malamdai Hiskalti. That's what the Mishnah is telling us when it tells us that I can learn from my students. What can you teach me? I'm the teacher. You're going to teach me. The best way to learn is when you teach a subject to a group of students and they ask you questions. And then you find out that there are some of those questions that you can't answer. And that there may be a loophole in, a crack in the idea that you're teaching. Sometimes yes, sometimes not. Sometimes the students ask questions that force me to think about what I just taught more deeply, and then I understand it much better. And the next time I teach it, I can actually deliver it much better because I have a much better understanding of it. It is a response. It is incumbent upon every one of us to respect every single person that we encounter, unless they are a danger to us. We must respect them. And that is the lesson I learned from these two conversations. One woman, very respectful. One woman, very disrespectful. One is creating a divide, and one is creating connection. And we must create more connection. That's my rant for the night. Thank you for listening. Thank you for not objecting yet, but right now I will unmute you and you are free to object to everything or anything I said. And I would love to hear it, and I will respect you and listen to you, hopefully.
Wow.
Yeah. Any comments, questions, rebuttals? Go for it. Now's the time.
Rabbi, I would like to say something that I have been at your house for Shabbos dinner. And I will say that one of the memories that I have so strongly, and you don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk. And you probably do not remember this. This was a number of